Parents demand I cancel my wedding for sister's engagement, but the truth about her cheating changed everything. I'm engaged to my fiancé, Jake. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and we've been together for about 8 months. Our wedding was scheduled for October, and everything was going according to plan until last week, when my parents shocked us with an unexpected request. For background, Mia, our 25-year-old younger sister, has always been the golden child in our family. She's been in a relationship with Tom, a 26-year-old man, for about 2 years. Throughout our lives, my parents have always showered Mia with attention and praise. I hate to sound negative, but I've always felt that Mia's successes overshadowed mine. She was a cheerleader in high school while I was a student and played on the volleyball team. Not that cheerleading doesn't deserve respect, but it always seemed like my achievements didn't get the same level of enthusiasm from my parents. Over time, I grew used to their absence and stopped expecting much from them. I became distant from Mia, though deep down I knew it wasn't her fault. I blamed Mom for everything. My perspective changed when I met Jake in college. He showed me that I deserve just as much attention and affection as anyone else. Jake helped me realize that we all have unique strengths, and if someone doesn't value my accomplishments, that's their loss. I also understood it wasn't fair to place all the blame on Mia when our parents were clearly the ones in charge. So I decided to rebuild my relationship with her. I started checking up on her more and letting her know she could talk to me about anything. At first, she hesitated, but eventually she began opening up. Mia was the first person I told when Jake proposed. She was excited for me and eager to help with the wedding planning. Everything seemed perfect. However, things took a turn when my mom called me last Wednesday. The conversation started innocuously enough. It didn't take long for her to get to the point. Mia and Tom were getting engaged. I was thrilled for Mia at first, but then Mom mentioned that Tom was planning to propose, not that he had already done so. She explained that Mia had told her that Tom had been hinting at proposing, asking about her ring size, advising her to buy a new outfit, and other typical signs. But Mia has a habit of romanticizing everything, so I wasn't sure how much of it was real. I asked Mom if she was sure that Tom was actually proposing, and she replied confidently that he was. That should have been the end of the conversation, but then my mother made an outrageous request. She asked me to cancel my wedding because Mia needed to be the center of attention for a year, complete with engagement photos and social media posts. I was shocked. Who asks their daughter to cancel her wedding for something so trivial as social media? I told Mom I couldn't do that, but she insisted. She said that if I went ahead with the wedding, they would withdraw all the money they had promised to cover the venue. It felt like blackmail. This was unfair, and I was furious. I had worked so hard for this wedding, and now it was being threatened just so Mia could have her time in the spotlight. In a moment of anger and frustration, I made a decision I'd never thought I'd make. I contacted Tom. I told him about something that had happened a few years ago when Mia and I, along with Jake and Tom, went on a double date. During the evening, Mia handed me her phone to hold while she went to the bathroom. A message popped up on the screen from someone named Mike, asking if they could get back together. I was shocked. When I confronted Mia about it, she brushed it off as nothing, just an old acquaintance. But something about the situation didn't sit right with me, and I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. I called Tom and told him what I had seen. Looking back, I realized this may not have been the best way to handle things, but I felt like I had to warn him. The next few days were a blur. My mom called me furious, accusing me of ruining everything. Tom confronted me about the message, and she initially denied it but later admitted to it. Tom broke up with her, and my parents were livid with me. They said I had destroyed the family, and they threatened to withdraw the funds for my wedding. Jake and I were devastated. I had worked so hard to get to this point, and now everything was at risk. I felt horrible for revealing the truth to Tom, especially since it had destroyed Mia's relationship. But my parents were insisting I cancel the wedding, and they wouldn't let up. I knew that I had done the right thing by telling Tom the truth. Eventually, Mia and I had a heated argument. She accused me of ruining her life and undermining her happiness. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to hurt her, but she wasn't listening. She hung up on me before I could even finish explaining. Then, out of nowhere, Meg, an old friend from childhood, contacted me. She told me that Mia had been caught cheating at a party on Meg's 25th birthday. Mia had been flirting with other guys while Tom was away, and later, that evening, she was caught with another man in another room. Meg was devastated and ended her friendship with Mia, but she felt I needed to know. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was part of a pattern of behavior. With Meg's statement and more evidence, I felt more justified in what I had done. Mia's actions were not a mistake, they were deliberate. I shared all of this with Tom when I met with him. He was devastated, but he thanked me for being honest. He said that it was better to know the truth before marrying Mia. Meanwhile, my parents were still furious and threatening to sue me for emotional distress and slander. They insisted that I apologize to Mia and make things right, but I refused. I knew I had done the right thing by telling the truth. Jake and I decided to go ahead with the wedding, even if it meant scaling back the budget. We found a cheaper venue with the help of one of Jake's friends. Despite the emotional turmoil and threats from my parents, we were determined to move forward. Then the situation escalated. My parents sent me a lawyer's letter demanding a public apology and a retraction of my statements about Mia's infidelity, or they would sue me for emotional damages. They accused me of ruining Mia's life. In the midst of all this, Mia called me again, furious and devastated. She said I had destroyed her reputation and her life. She told me she had lost her job because Tom had informed her colleagues about the affair. The rumors had spread, and she was now the target of criticism. Mia demanded that I apologize, but I couldn't. I spoke to Jake, and we decided to consult a lawyer. The situation was spiraling out of control, and we couldn't afford a legal battle. But we knew we had to protect ourselves. A few days later, Tom's mother called me. She thanked me for being honest with Tom and helping him see the truth. Tom had decided to move to another city to start fresh, and his mother said he appreciated me for sparing him from making a huge mistake. My parents, however, were still determined to make me apologize. They came to our house furious, demanding that I fix things with Mia. They threatened to cut me off financially and continue with the lawsuit. I refused to apologize. I told them that Mia's actions had consequences and I would not back down. In the end, despite everything, Jake and I decided to move forward with our wedding. We knew it would be difficult, but we were determined to stay true to ourselves and each other. The legal threats from my parents were still looming, but we had a strong case. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know I've made the right decision. In the days following the tense meeting at our house, the weight of the situation continued to press on my shoulders. The reality of the chaos I had triggered hit me harder with each passing moment, and I still couldn't believe how deep everything had spiraled. My parents, once pillars of my life, Mia, my sister, once my closest rival and confidant, had turned against me, unable or unwilling to face the truth of her own actions. The letter from my parents' lawyer had thrown me into a panic. They were demanding a public apology, retraction of my statements about Mia's infidelity, and monetary compensation for the damage they claimed I caused. It felt like I was living in some twisted version of my own life. Jake had been my rock throughout this entire ordeal. His unwavering support and gentle reminders that we were doing the right thing helped me keep my head above water. Every day I felt more exhausted, more drained, but Jake would remind me to stay focused on what mattered. We still had each other. Our love was still there. Despite the growing distance from my family, I knew I had the chance to build something strong with him, and that thought kept me going. At the same time, the guilt kept eating away at me. I had never imagined things would get this out of control. I was trying to defend myself, but at the same time I couldn't ignore the fallout from the choices I made. The hardest part was knowing how much damage I had done to Mia and Tom's relationship. I'd never wanted to hurt anyone, but I felt like I had no other option. If I hadn't spoken up, Mia would have gone on with her life, pretending everything was fine, while Tom would have married a woman who had lied to him for years. A few days after the meeting, Mia finally reached out to me. I saw her name flash on my phone and my heart sank. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I wasn't ready for the venom in her voice. She accused me of destroying her life, of being selfish and bitter, of ruining her happiness out of spite. She screamed at me, telling me that I had no right to meddle in her relationship. The words stung, but I stood firm. I reminded her that she had cheated on Tom not once, but repeatedly. I told her she couldn't blame me for her choices. Her response was devastating. She told me that I had always been jealous of her, that I had always wanted to take the spotlight from her even though she had done nothing wrong. She didn't seem to understand that the problem wasn't about who got the spotlight, it was about the lies she had been living. As I hung up, I felt a deep emptiness wash over me. I couldn't seem to reconcile the woman who had once been my sister, the one I had laughed with, confided in, and hoped to rebuild a relationship with the one I was facing now. This version of Mia wasn't the sister I remembered. She was someone else, someone who would go to great lengths to cover up her mistakes, someone who could blame everyone but herself. The days dragged on, and the tension between my family and me reached a boiling point. My parents continued to demand I apologize, accusing me of betraying Mia and the family. They couldn't see beyond their protective bubble around Mia. All they saw was their precious daughter, the one who could do no wrong, the one who deserved all the attention. I couldn't understand it. The more I tried to explain, the more they refused to listen. Then came the legal threats. The letter from their lawyer was just the beginning. They were determined to make me pay for my sins, even if that meant destroying me financially. The thought of facing a lawsuit was overwhelming, but I couldn't let them win. I had to stand my ground. With Jake by my side, I reached out to our lawyer, gathering evidence, proof of Mia's past behavior, and testimonies from people who had witnessed it. Meg, who had been the one to reveal Mia's affair at the party, offered to testify. She had sent me a statement about what she had seen, which would serve as another piece of the puzzle. As I prepared for what felt like an inevitable battle, another phone call came. It was from Tom's mother. She thanked me for telling Tom the truth. Despite the pain it had caused, she acknowledged that Tom had needed to know before making a life-changing commitment. I was grateful for her kind words, though the situation still felt far from resolution. I hadn't expected to hear from her, but her call provided a small sense of relief. Tom had gone through a lot. It wasn't easy to be confronted with the truth, especially from a family member of the woman he was about to marry. But Tom had always been a good man, and I knew that he deserved better than what Mia had been offering him. I was glad that he was taking time to heal and reflect. At least now he could move forward with the truth, not an illusion. Meanwhile, my family's reaction was anything but supportive. They turned up at our place one afternoon demanding to speak with me. Jake and I had agreed to meet with them, hoping we could finally come to some sort of resolution. But I knew deep down that there was no resolution where they were concerned. They didn't want the truth, they wanted Mia to be the victim, and they wanted me to grovel. The confrontation started badly, with my mother in tears and my father red-faced with anger. They insisted that I apologize, that I make things right with Mia. But I couldn't. I couldn't apologize for doing the right thing. As they demanded that I retract everything, I opened the folder I had prepared. Inside were the messages from Mia's ex, Mike. There were screenshots from Meg's party. There were the text exchanges where Mia admitted to cheating on Tom. There was the letter from Tom confirming how he felt about Mia's actions and why he couldn't marry her. The room fell silent as my parents took in the evidence. My mother gasped. My father's face turned purple with rage. Mia just sat there pale, saying nothing. For the first time, I saw her face the truth. It wasn't easy to look at, but it was real. I turned to Tom. He was clearly in shock, but I saw something else in his eyes: relief. He thanked me, and for the first time I felt like I had done the right thing. My parents didn't know how to respond. The evidence was too overwhelming. They couldn't argue their way out of it. Mia didn't speak. She just stared at the papers, her face twisted in a mix of shock and disbelief. It was as though everything had come crashing down on her in that one moment, and there was no way to undo it. My father was the first to speak, but it wasn't the apology I expected. He shouted at me, telling me that I had destroyed the family. He accused me of being cruel and heartless, of being jealous of Mia and her life. He blamed me for everything that had happened. I was no longer his daughter in his eyes. I didn't back down. I couldn't. I had done the right thing. I had told the truth. I didn't owe Mia an apology. I didn't owe my parents an apology. The truth wasn't something to apologize for. And that was the hardest lesson of all for them and for me. They left that evening, my mother sobbing and my father still seething with rage. As they stormed out, I knew that things between us would never be the same. But despite everything, I wasn't backing down. Jake, I had a future to look forward to. The wedding planning continued, albeit on a smaller scale. We had to adjust our budget, but we were determined to make it work. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of my life. The struggle wasn't over, and I knew that the drama would continue to unfold. But I wasn't going to let my family's dysfunction define me anymore. I had Jake, I had my own integrity, and I was going to move forward no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. The months that followed were a whirlwind of emotions, court hearings, and difficult decisions. My life had transformed from something I thought I could control into a series of events beyond my wildest expectations. But through it all, I had learned one important lesson: the truth, no matter how painful, would always be my guide. After the confrontation with my parents, things went cold. My mother and father barely spoke to me. My phone rang occasionally with messages of rage, accusations, and blame. Mia, in her own way, became a ghost in my life. She blocked me on social media, refused to take my calls, and even tried to convince others in the family that I was the villain. But no matter how many false narratives she spun, I knew the truth. And slowly, so did others. Tom, after a period of healing, found his footing again. He distanced himself. He thanked me several times for opening his eyes to what had been happening behind his back. Though our relationship was strained, I could see that he was moving forward, as difficult as it was. He had a long road ahead of him, but I hoped he'd find peace. As for my parents, I kept my distance. It hurt more than I expected. I had always been close to them, and the rift that had formed between us was a painful reminder that no amount of blood or family ties could protect someone from the truth. I wanted to believe they would come around, but their refusal to acknowledge me as actions left me feeling helpless. Every attempt to reason with them was met with anger or silence. The legal battle raged on. My family's lawyer, a relentless and high-powered individual, tried to turn the courts against me, but I refused to back down. With Jake's unwavering support and the help of our lawyer, we compiled more evidence, contacted witnesses, and fought back with everything we had. In the end, it wasn't just the truth that prevailed, but the strength of our resolve. The judge ruled in our favor, dismissing the case and ordering my parents to pay my legal fees. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but it felt like a turning point, a signal that justice would prevail, no matter how long it took. And then, finally, the day came when everything seemed to fall into place. Jake and I, after all the chaos, the heartache, and the turmoil, stood in front of our closest friends and family, those who had stood by us through thick and thin, and exchanged vows. The ceremony was intimate, simple, and full of love. There were no extravagant decorations, no frills. It was just us, our love, and the future we were determined to build together. As I stood there gazing at Jake with tears in my eyes, I realized how far we had. We had survived a storm together, stronger than ever. There were moments in the past few months when I wasn't sure we would make it, when the weight of everything felt like it might break us. But we didn't give up. We fought for each other. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The reception that followed was full of laughter, dancing, and genuine happiness. Friends who had once been silent came to us expressing their support. The people who mattered the most, our true allies, were there. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could breathe freely. The burdens that had weighed me down were lifted. I wasn't carrying the secrets anymore. I wasn't running from the truth. I had confronted it all, and now I was finally free. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle into a new rhythm. The pressure from my family eased, though the rift remained. My parents, still unwilling to acknowledge the truth, eventually reached out with a half-hearted apology. It wasn't the reconciliation I had hoped for, but it was a start. I didn't know if we would ever truly be whole again, but I had learned that sometimes you have to accept people for who they are and let go of the hope of a perfect reunion. It wasn't easy, but it was part of healing. Mia, too, eventually reached out. Her message was a long one, filled with blame, anger, and an attempt at a half-hearted explanation. She tried to justify her actions, but I had no room for excuses anymore. I had forgiven her in my heart long ago, but forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Life with Jake, on the other hand, blossomed. We bought a small house not too far from where we had lived before. It wasn't extravagant, but it was ours. We filled it with laughter, love, and the promise of a future built on trust and mutual respect. Our love had been tested, but it had never wavered. It had become stronger, like an unbreakable foundation that could withstand anything life threw at us. As the years passed, I learned to treasure the peace we had fought for. The chaos of the past seemed so distant, like a dark chapter in a book I was glad to have closed. I no longer felt the need to explain myself to anyone. I had taken a stand for what was right, for what was true, and in doing so, I had learned to stand tall in my own life. I still think about my parents sometimes, wonder if they'll ever understand. I wonder if Mia will ever find the happiness she's chasing. But I know one thing for certain: I will not let the mistakes of the past define me. My life is mine to live, and I am no longer bound by the mistakes of others. In the end, the story of my family, my sister, and the lies that nearly destroyed us isn't just about betrayal and pain, it's about finding strength. And as I look at Jake, my heart swells with gratitude. We have built something beautiful together, a life free from secrets, full of honesty, and brimming with hope for the future.